Hello, everybody, and welcome to our live stream, Ace the GMAT in less than 4 weeks. I'm Erika. Thank you so much for being here today. I know folks are probably still arriving, but if you are here, let me know in the chat. Can you see me? Can you hear me? Can you see my slideshow? Let me know. All right. And while folks are showing up and saying hi, we're here. I would also love to know, where are you in the world and what time is it for you? So I'll start. I'm in Portland, Oregon. I'm on the west coast of the United States. So it is 9 a.m., which means I've had my coffee, but it's still settling in. So you get early morning Erika. All right. I'm seeing we got folks here. I'm seeing, let's see, KP Agrawal. I'm seeing Zainab. I'm seeing Danyashri. I'm seeing Preetam. I'm seeing Pooja. Nice. Hi, everybody. All right. And again, reminding folks, I want to know, where are you in the world and what time is it for you? Okay, looks like we got a bunch of folks in India and Pakistan, which means it is late for you guys. Thank you for being here late in the evening to see this live stream. I hope it does what you need it to. So we got some different times. It's morning for me. It's night for a lot of folks here in the chat. Okay, while folks are still arriving and saying hi in the chat, we'll go ahead and get started. So as a reminder, today's live stream is going to be on how to ace the GMAT in less than 4 weeks. Tips to make the most of a short study timeline. So maybe if you are a round 3 applicant, this is a relevant live stream for you. Ooh, we got James from Nairobi, also late. All right, so thank you again for being here in the evening or whatever time it is. All right, so we're going to go ahead and jump in. So really quick introduction. Hi, my name is Erika. So I'm the Senior Manager of Product and Engineering at Magoosh, which you might be going, that's funny. Why are you doing this live stream? Well, I have spent most of my life in kind of the content sector. So spending time in instruction, spending time writing and teaching test prep. And now I spend a little bit more time with how do we deliver that test prep. So my experience, I have a 770 GMAT score. I have more than 1 million views on YouTube. You might have seen some of them somewhere. Some of them here on this channel with GMAT Club, some of them on other channels. Currently, you can see me on the Magoosh GMAT YouTube channel. Check that out. I'm there. A lot of our other really awesome experts are there. We have great videos all the time. And I have, as I mentioned, years of experience teaching and writing and now delivering test prep. So I live in Portland, Oregon with my husband and my 2 cats. So you can see them there, Roz and Mal. So Roz is here. She might make an appearance as my co-presenter today. Mal is at the vet getting some important tests done. So if you want to send a good luck Mal in the chat, I'm sure he would appreciate it. All right, so jumping in. So you've got under a month until test day. And I'm guessing if you are here, you have less than a month until your test day. Maybe you're applying round 3 to business school. Let me know in the chat, how long is it until your test day? Have you got a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks? Maybe you're here, you've got more than a month, but you're trying to be prepared. Let me know in the chat, how long is it until your test day? Now, while folks are filling that in, I want to go ahead and just start with a disclaimer. This is not an ideal study timeline, all right? I just want us to start on the same page, which is that in an ideal world, we would be spending more time until test day. All right, I'm seeing some folks in here. We got a test next week. We got some folks with 3 months, 2 months. So maybe a more typical recommended study timeline. We got 4 weeks, so we're right on that border of a month. Okay, so we got some folks who've got a longer study timeline. That's great. These tips are still going to be relevant to you. I'll talk about how we can adapt them for a longer timeline. But for those folks who've got 4 weeks, who've got 1 week, this is really for you. All right, so starting off, less than a month until test day is not an ideal study timeline. Now, a month is really where I sort of say that's kind of that threshold of where we start getting into real learning, right? We are actually internalizing something. We are getting that deep knowledge. We are able to recognize things and apply things and really getting to a point where we're starting to really understand these problems and being able to build on that previous understanding. So if you're right at that month mark, we're getting into the territory of like, okay, this is more typical study, right? The sort of study we'd see with a 2 or a 3 month timeline. If we're looking at less than a month, we're probably not looking at a lot of real learning. Just being really honest here. This is probably not something we are carrying forward and building on a lot. This is more in the territory of short-term recall, right? We are looking for stuff that we are going to look at. We are going to do our best to remember it on test day. So this is not ideal just from an education perspective. Doesn't mean we can't make it work, but it's not ideal, all right? It also means, and this isn't in my slideshow, but I'm going to mention it now, that you're not going to be able to get to everything, right? If you've got a 2 to 3 month timeline, you can maybe look at something more comprehensive, right? You can learn everything on the test. But if you're in here like String 7, you got 3 weeks, we're going to need to focus on the very specific things that you need. And we're going to need to remember them on test day. So, what does this mean? If you are looking for a significant point improvement and you can extend your timeline, so that might mean, hey, maybe you're going to take this test, but then you're going to take another one. Or maybe you're going, hey, maybe I don't need to apply this year. Maybe I'm going to apply next year. I recommend doing it. If there's any way for you to extend your study timeline, you should do that. You are going to get much better study, more effective results if you have more time. I typically recommend 2 to 3 months as the ideal kind of study timeline. All right. Now, if you are looking for a smaller improvement, so I'm talking less than 100 points, that's something that's doable potentially within a month. Or your timeline is not flexible. You have to apply now. There is no choice. You are taking the test. Your test day is final. Then this is the live stream for you. And if you're in here and you've got 2 to 3 months until test day, start studying now. Don't wait until you've got a month left. Start now. And again, I'll talk through how you can apply these strategies in the longer term. Okay, now that we've gotten that out of the way, another disclaimer. So I know I just mentioned that, hey, if you're looking at a smaller point improvement of less than 100 points, maybe you can get that done within a month. I'm going to just disclaim here, the number of points you can improve by depends on a lot of factors. All right. It might be less than 100. It could even be more than 100. It's just going to depend on a lot of things. I'm going to list those out here. The first is the baseline score. All right. If you are starting at a 650, all right, achieving 100 points is a big deal, right? That's a significant change from 650 up to 750. You're looking at really kind of tough competition once you get up near the top, right? If you are further down, maybe you're looking at a 450 and you're looking to improve up to a 550, usually there are some pretty key changes that you can make to achieve that more easily. So baseline score is going to be a big determiner of how much you can improve within a month. Similarly, if you've done any previous improvement, so like I mentioned, right, if we're starting at a 450, there are likely some things that we can do now that can take that score to the next level, right, pretty fast. Often things like timing, right? If you're not finishing a section, that is an easy strategic fix that can jump your score 100 points, maybe more, really fast. All right. So if you have not previously done any study or made any previous improvements, there's usually some quick things we can do to just level up the score quite quickly. It might just be quick strategy, right, for how to approach reading comprehension, right? That can level up your score really, really fast. Now, if you've already done that, okay, now we're looking at the more minute changes, all right? So you're going to get smaller increases from there. So if you're starting from 0, no previous improvement, you're likely going to be able to improve more. If you're starting from a little bit of study, you're likely looking at a smaller improvement. Related, solvability of existing issues. So this is very closely tied to the previous bullet. If you're looking at something that is a strategic change, all right, and it is a solvable strategic change, right? Like dialing in your timing strategy. Again, that's 100 points. Lightning fast in a lot of cases. All right. Now, if you're looking for something maybe a little less solvable, all right, maybe we're really struggling with comprehension issues on certain types of reading passages, or maybe we're really struggling with a certain type of content. All right. And it's content that we're having trouble deciphering it. All right. Okay. That might be a little bit less solvable. All right. So it just has to do with what you're dealing with and how solvable those issues are within that month time frame. Study availability. All right. If you are studying 5 hours a week, which is about the bottom end of what I would say is an acceptable amount to study per week. You're studying 5 hours per week. All right. There's opportunity for improvement here if that study is really, really, really good. And I'm going to talk about how to make that study really, really good. You are going to improve a different amount likely than someone who's committing 10 hours per week, 15 hours per week. I would only recommend 20 hours per week if you don't have any sort of job. I would not ever recommend 6 hours a day. I'm seeing that in the chat. I don't recommend that. I'm going to talk through what my recommendations are for kind of maximum study per day, but that's getting into territory of maybe diminishing returns. All right. So study availability is going to really impact how much study you're able to do and how much you're able to improve. And then finally, quality of study materials. If you are working off of online forums like GMAT Club, that's awesome, right? You can get a lot of really good stuff in there if you hunt it down. All right. That's going to be maybe a slightly different experience than if you are using, say, GMAT Club with something like Magoosh, right? So something that is providing a high quality bank of lessons and questions and question explanations, right? That's going to be easier to learn from than completely self-serve going from blog articles and forums, etc. Similarly, there's some materials out there that maybe aren't super test realistic. That's going to be a different experience studying than working with really good high quality stuff like you can find from Magoosh or that you can find from official practice. All right. So the quality of your study materials will inform how much you're going to be able to improve. Now, with all of that said, all right, these tips are going to help you maximize your study regardless of what you're working with. So these tips are going to help you have effective study, making the most of your baseline score, your previous improvement, the solvability of your issues, your study availability, and the quality of your study materials. So these tips will help you no matter what. All right, so we're going to go ahead and get started with tip number 1. But first, I want to just mention we are going to do a Q&A at the end of this session. So if you have questions for the Q&A, you can add those now, or you can hold off until the end, and we will answer those. So add your questions in the chat either now or later, and I'll do my best to get to them. Okay, so we are going to move on to tip number 1 for acing the GMAT in less than 4 weeks. All right, tip number 1. This one's easy. Take a practice test now. I don't mean turn off this live stream and take it right now. If you've got a week left until your test day, maybe take the test right after this live stream, right? Maybe take a break, but take your practice test very, 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 very soon. Why? Why are we going to do that? Well, practice tests are going to, 1, be excellent practice for your test day, right? Taking the test is its own beast. We need to have experience with taking it before we actually take it, right? You can know the content really well and not be very good at taking the test. We need to practice it at least once before test day. But also, it is going to provide us the foundation for the rest of our month of study. So take your practice test. This practice test should be full length. Don't take a diagnostic, take an actual practice test. This practice test should be realistic, if not official. If you can get an official practice test, maybe you haven't taken one of the free ones, or you can splash out a little bit for one of the paid ones. There's a bunch from GMAT. That's the move, all right? But if not, use something realistic. So I recommend the Magoosh practice tests. They work on an algorithm just like the actual tests, and the problems are realistic. So find a realistic practice test and take it. And then take that test as realistically as possible. So don't pause in the middle. That's not what you'll do on test day. We want to create a realistic experience. So take it start to finish. Take breaks where there's breaks. Don't rush through it. If you're not going to rush through it on test day, you want to do as well as you can within realistic boundaries for what would be happening on test day. So take your practice test ASAP. Now you might be going, hey, I've taken a practice test before. Do I need to take one? The answer is still yes, unless you took it yesterday. Take a practice test. Do it. And this is going to give you a baseline score if you don't already have one, right? Which is going to, again, kind of give us a realm of how much we can potentially improve, right? What are we starting with? As well as the foundation for the rest of your study. Okay. So now let's talk about what we're going to do with this foundation. And I'm seeing something in the chat. I'm consistently acing medium level, but not very hard questions, very volatile on those. What's my recommendation to take that leap and stay consistent at hard levels? I've got a recommendation coming up. So hang on, Antonio, for tip 3. All right. But first, tip number 2, review your mistakes. So what you're going to do is you're going to take that practice test, be done for the day, all right? That's a lot of time. But the next day, right, we want it to be fresh. So come back the next day and review your mistakes, all right? And what we're going to do is we're going to error log. Now, in the chat, let me know if you've heard of the concept of an error log, all right? This is usually a pretty well-known concept. It's something that a lot of people are familiar with. But most people are doing error logs wrong. They are not doing a very effective error log, because mostly what they're doing is they're writing down the problem and maybe pasting it in an Excel sheet, and then they're putting in the right answer and they're going, oh, it was fractions. I had a hard time with fractions. Not good enough, all right? Error logs are meant to be critical reflections on what went wrong, all right? Why that went wrong, and how you can recognize and avoid mistakes next time, all right? So rather than, for instance, saying, oh man, I'm really struggling with geometry, all right? We're gonna go, okay, well, what's actually happening here? Maybe we go, okay, you know what? I didn't recognize this was a special triangle, all right? So it's triangles, but specifically it's special triangles. Specifically, it's a 30, 60, 90. Okay, so why did I make the mistake? Well, I jumped too quickly into maybe the statement, say it's data sufficiency, and I didn't take enough time working with the diagram. If I'd spent a little more time with the diagram, I probably would have recognized that this was a special triangle. And if I'd recognized that, then I could have solved the problem. So how can I recognize and avoid this mistake next time? I can look at the diagram for geometry questions first. Look for secrets like special triangles, similar triangles. I can label my diagram as much as I can, and then I go on to my statements. Now that is an effective error log. All right? So we are going in depth on our mistakes from our practice test. Now, you might notice that was specific, right? So I'm not saying it's geometry, it's triangles, it's special triangles even. I'm getting more and more refined. So geometry, triangles, special triangles, 30, 60, 90, data sufficiency, labeling diagrams. I am getting hyper specific for each question. And beyond that, I'm thinking more strategy than content. So if I was doing a really high level error log, what went wrong? Oh, triangles. right? But the real issue wasn't the triangle. The issue was that it was a data sufficiency question that I jumped ahead to the statements on before really working with my diagram to notice that thing about the special triangles. All right. So as you're going through the error log, it's going to be really tempting to just say, it's a content issue, it's triangles. It's not. It's usually a strategy issue. Now, sometimes it's content. Sometimes you just didn't know how to do it and you can learn, and that's usually a pretty easy fix. Strategy is the more important thing. Now, I've got a question from Sandeep. Are error logs applicable to CR and RC as well? Yes, yes, they are. So for CR, for example, a lot of times we're going to go, I'm just really bad at CR, right? It's so hard. And that's relatable, right? It's a common area of challenge for a lot of folks, but we can get more specific. What type of CR question is it? Oh, it's an assumption question. Well, okay, let's get a little more specific. Okay, what type of assumption question? Oh, okay, it's an assumption question where they use kind of tricky language. So I actually couldn't tell it was an assumption question. I thought it was a strengthen. Okay, all right. More than that, let's dig in. Maybe also we had some troubles with the passage where the conclusion wasn't at the end. The conclusion was at the beginning, and that confused me, right? Because I wasn't entirely sure how the pieces fit together. So instead of making a prediction, I jumped to the answer choices, which is never a good idea. Okay, so now we can get a really effective breakdown. I am struggling with assumption questions. In particular, I am struggling with identifying what is an assumption, right? Versus what is kind of like a classic strengthen, right? Or, what's an inference versus a classic strengthen, or what's an assumption versus an inference, all right? So we're going, I am having a hard time identifying assumption questions, all right? Once I identify it, maybe I'm great at negating, all right? But I can't identify. That's my issue. Okay, similarly with the passage, I'm having a hard time assuming that the conclusion comes last. I need to recognize that conclusions can come at any point in that prompt. And then I need to be using clues like transition words to identify where my conclusion is. And that's going to help me go, okay, where's the gap between everything else and that conclusion? And that's going to help me make my prediction. And then when I'm stressed out, don't jump to the answer choices. Take a step back, make a prediction, then go to the answer choices. All right. See that? Boom, 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 boom. Tons of strategy out of one potential question. All right. Same thing goes for RC. So error logs work for everything. You're just going to need to take time. In particular with the verbal questions, particularly RC and CR, you're going to need to spend more time really thinking strategy. What did I do? This is why it's so important to do this like the next day, because if you wait more days, you won't know what you did. And it's going to be really hard to identify what all that how stuff. The what is easy to identify later, but the why and the how, that's the important part. That's going to be harder to get at later. All right, and we are going to do this for every question we practice. So we're going to start by doing this for our practice test, right? And if you've got a week left, that might be really all you get to is error logging the practice test. And that is a really good thing to do. That's the best thing you can do right now. But if you've got a whole month, right? You've got 2 to 3 months. We're going to do this for literally everything we practice. All of our practice tests, all of our study sessions, every practice problem that we miss, that we make a mistake on, we are going to error log. And this error log is going to be the most powerful study guide you've ever seen. All right. Moving into tip number 3. All right. And I'm seeing a lot of folks coming back to Antonio going, hey, we got a plateau here, right? I'm capped out at a certain point. What should I study? Should I move on to advanced questions? This tip is for you. Target your weaknesses with a study plan. All right. Now, like I mentioned, if you've got a longer study timeline, maybe 2, 3 months, 4 months, right? You got a year, right? We got time. Maybe you can go with something more comprehensive, right? You can do a course, right? Like the course is taught at Magoosh, right? Course written by me, by the way. So if you wanna take that course, I recommend it. If you've got a longer study timeline, but if you've got a month left, I would not recommend that course, even though I wrote it. Because with a month, we cannot study everything. We have to study the things that are going to make a difference. So don't waste your time on sentence correction if that is an area of strength. Don't waste your time with arithmetic if that's an area of strength. Don't waste your time with algebra if that's an area of strength. Don't waste your time with problem solving if that's an area of strength. Do the stuff you are struggling with. So your distribution of mistakes should equal your distribution of study. All right. So if you are making a lot of mistakes on critical reasoning, that is what you need to study. You can study a little bit of everything else, right? If 20% of your mistakes are RC, sure, do a little bit of RC. All right. If 30% of your mistakes are problem solving, sure, do a little bit of that. But if 70% of your mistakes are data sufficiency, that's where most of your study should be going. All right. So distribution of mistakes equals distribution of study. And again, get specific here. Is it math or is it data sufficiency? Is it data sufficiency or is it specifically geometry data sufficiency? Get hyper specific. Similarly, now we're talking level, all right? And I'm seeing again in the chat, a lot of folks are saying, I really want to get these hard questions right because I am right at this medium level. How do I make the leap? And I find that often when folks are struggling to make the leap, it's because they're studying at the wrong level. All right. And I find that often what's happening is that folks have pushed too far. They are studying super high level questions when really they need to be at medium high. All right. So what you're going to do is you're going to take your baseline score from that practice test, and that maybe plus 50 to 100 points is where you're going to be studying. Now, I've talked at length about the GMAT algorithm, so I'm not going to talk at length about it here. But essentially, what is happening is that your level, your score, is where you are missing 50% of questions. The reason you're not going higher is that right there, where you're missing 50% of questions, you're missing 50% of them. If you don't miss 50% of them, your level moves up. All right. So your score is where you need to be studying. That's where you need to stop missing questions. And then right above it, maybe we can start getting in there. All right. So your baseline score, that is where you study. I see a lot of folks who are going, I'm getting a 600 and I want to get a 700. So I'm going to study 700 level questions. Usually not the right call. I'm getting a 500 and I want to get a 700. I am going to study 700 level questions. Really not the right call. You are not going to see that level of questions. The problem is those 500, 550 level questions that you are missing. Practice those, all right? Then if your score moves up, then you can start moving your score up or moving your level of study up with your score. Hopefully that makes sense, all right? So your baseline score should be your level of study. You can go up 50 to 100 points from there, but don't go any higher. That is not gonna help you until you are at that level where you are seeing and missing those questions on testing, all right? So if you're finding you are consistently acing medium level questions, but not hard, find where you're getting 50%. Those are the ones. Those are the ones you need to practice. Don't go higher. Right there, right at that threshold. And again, that's where you should be scoring. All right? Okay, hopefully that's helpful. Now, okay, so now that we understand how that works, we are going to use the mistakes on that practice test we just did to create our study plan. All right, so we've gone and we have error logged in detail. We have a really clear picture of what it is that we are missing. That's gonna lead us to our study plan. All right. Now, study plan might be pretty strategic. It might be kind of around time management. That's great. That's usually a pretty easy fix. But it might be a little more content oriented. Maybe we're really struggling with geometry. All right. It might be question type oriented. Maybe we're really struggling with data sufficiency regardless of content. Maybe it might be, we're really missing a ton of sentence correction. And it's kind of all over the place. So it's probably our sentence correction strategy that's the problem. All right. So we're going to use those mistakes to figure out what we need to be focused on. And then as we go, all right, again, if you're studying for 1 week, 2 weeks, you're probably going to use that. That's it. That's your study plan. The mistakes from your first practice test. If we have more time, we have a month, we have multiple months, we're going to use each practice test and our error log for each practice test to update our plan. So maybe we were really struggling in particular with sentence correction in our first test, but we really nailed it. We locked in a strategy for our second practice test. It got a lot better, but maybe kind of I fell off in reading comprehension. Maybe my score there is not as consistent as I thought. Okay, all right. So for my next one, maybe I'll do a little bit of study with that sentence correction just to kind of lock in, but I'm going to spend some more time with reading comprehension. All right. So we can kind of refine our study plan as we go, which is a benefit of having a longer timeline. All right. Okay, so we're going to target our weaknesses with a study plan, focus on our areas where we're making mistakes. We're going to practice it at the right level, which is our baseline score. Okay. Tip number 4. Structure your study sessions to optimize learning. Okay, so we know what we need to be studying. All right, we know what we need to be doing. Okay, but now we need to study it in an effective way. Right? I'm seeing a question in the chat from Vishnu. How many mocks would I suggest? Is there a line one should draw? I've got that in tip number 5, so hang on. So we know what we're studying, but how do we study it to be effective? This is the tip where I see most folks blow it. This is where I see people make mistakes because folks go, okay, I am going to drill 100 data sufficiency questions. I'm going to do it. All right. And they do that and then they're done and they don't improve. If anything, they get worse because they've made mistakes that they've made before and they're actually building bad habits. So once we know what to study, we need to study it in a way that supports long-term learning or at least short-term recall, at least not building bad habits. So how do we do that? I recommend a 4-step process for every study session. And it starts with setting your intention. All right. This might sound maybe a little new wavy, maybe a little goofy, but I promise this is critical. We want to set ourselves up for success with every study session. So do not launch in with a practice question. No, start with your error log. We spend a lot of time on this. We need to use it. So every study session, before every practice test, we are going to look at our error log and we're specifically going to look at those hows, right? How do I fix it? We're going to look at our recent hows and we are going to make a commitment to ourselves. I am not going to make that mistake today. I'm not going to do that, right? Because every time we make the same mistake, we build a habit and that is a bad habit. If you've got a month, you cannot afford to build a bad habit. You need to build good habits or at least practice not doing the bad thing. All right. So commit to avoiding that mistake today. All right. So set our intention, review mistakes, don't make them. Okay. Then we're not jumping into practice questions yet. We're going to start with learning. All right. Now, this is where quality of study materials really starts to matter because we're going to want to read or watch or in some way take in educational material based on our study plan. So if you were really struggling with strategy on sentence correction, particularly long sentence correction questions, that's something that if you don't have, a book or an online program, you could search on GMAT Club. You could search on YouTube. I have a video on that. I have several videos on that. You could search on the internet, find something on the Magoosh blog or other blogs, right? You're going to find something catered to what you are trying to fix with your study plan. All right. It could be something more specific. Maybe you're really struggling with permutations and combinations. Again, something I've got a video on YouTube, something that you can find tons of great stuff on GMAT Club, right? You're going to learn. We're not going to practice yet because we don't know what to do. We're going to learn what to do. All right. I really recommend if you are, if you're working with more than a week, if you're working with a month, right, or longer than a month, I really recommend some material like Magoosh because it comes with video lessons, right? It comes with something that is going to be easy to find. It's going to be comprehensive. It's going to have everything you need. And then you can figure out what you want to use within it. All right. You're not going to be required to go hunt that down on the web. You can do that, but it's really helpful to have that educational material from experts like me. All right. So we're going to learn. All right. Now, once we've learned, then we're going to practice. All right. And we're going to review our intentions. I am not going to make those mistakes. All right. So if we're doing sentence correction practice, we're going to go, okay, what were the sentence correction mistakes I made? Not going to do that. I'm going to apply what I learned and I'm going to avoid those mistakes. All right. So we're going to find related practice problems and we're going to do those. All right. Again, this is where it's helpful to have high quality study materials. So official stuff is the best, right? But it's kind of hard to segment into what you want, right? So we're not just going to be ideally practicing sentence correction. We're going to be going, okay, I'm struggling with sentence correction that is level whatever, that specifically is dealing with long sentences, or that is specifically dealing with parallelism, all right? With a program like Magoosh, you can refine your questions. If you don't have something like that, you can use GMAT Club and look for, hey, I'm looking for parallelism questions at this level. And you can find what you're looking for and practice there. So practice what you have studied, all right? Commit to not making the same mistakes. Now, in an ideal world, you make no mistakes. Incredible, right? Okay, maybe we're looking at a higher level now or a different topic, but most likely you do make mistakes. You're going to error log. You're going to review. So the practice problems you miss, you're going to go through and go boop, 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 boop. All right, what did I do wrong? Why did I do it? How can I fix it on a related problem? And then when you go into your next day of study, you'll be able to review those. When you go into your next practice test, you'll be able to review those. So we are doing our best, not only to focus our learning on the most important areas, but we are doing our best to actually learn, to actually improve, and not just to keep repeating the same mistakes over and over again. So this is an ideal study session block. Set your intention, usually pretty quick, 10 minutes or so. Learn, that's usually 20 or so. Practice, that's usually 20 or so. Review, maybe 10 minutes. That's an hour, all right? Now you can repeat that. You can do multiple study sessions within a day, all right? You can do 2, you can do 3. If you don't have a job or school, maybe you can do 4. That's a lot though, all right? But this is the ideal structure for learning. All right. Now, moving on to tip number 5, which I've seen some questions about this. Don't overdo it. All right. This I see especially from folks with a short study timeline. I got a week. I got a month. I need to go, 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 right? I see folks making it their full-time job to study. 1, it's not sustainable. I see a lot of folks do this for a few days and then they don't study at all, right? Because they get burnt out on studying and they end up studying less than they would have if they had a sustainable study pattern up until their test day. But 2, we hit a point of diminishing returns. At a certain point, our brain cannot take anymore and we start making mistakes. And again, making mistakes is building bad habits. We want to emphasize the quality of our study, not so much the quantity, all right? We want to go up to the point where the quality starts diminishing and we're going to stop, all right? So I'll give you my recommendations on how to not overdo it, how to study the right amount. So I had some folks asking, how many mock tests, how many practice tests would I suggest? And I recommend a number based on your timeline. Never, in my perspective, take more than 1 practice test every week. All right? Because practice tests are a lot of work. And it is very easy if you've taken 1 practice test and you followed up the next day with another practice test to start making mistakes you wouldn't make otherwise. Builds bad habits, and it's a complete waste of time, all right? Take a test every week. Within a week, and ideally 2 weeks, you are learning something. You have something you can apply on that practice test, right? Something that you can actually improve on. If you're taking a practice test 2 days later, you don't have anything that you're applying yet, all right? So 1 to 2 weeks gives you time to recover but it also gives you time to actually have something that you can make use of on your next practice test. Practice tests are opportunities to apply learnings. All right. Give yourself a week to 2 weeks to get some learnings. All right. So you're going to take a practice test every 1 to 2 weeks with your last a week out from test day. Now, I know some folks are in here with a longer study timeline, right? Multiple months. Take a look at the number of practice tests you have. If you do not have enough practice tests to do one every 2 weeks, do 3 weeks, do 4 weeks. All right. But for a shorter timeline, you can afford one every 1 to 2 weeks. All right. Your last test, like I mentioned, should be about a week out from test day. Again, if it's too close to test day, like the day before, you can be not on your best for test day. I've seen it happen. And it's really unfortunate when you've spent this really good time doing really high quality study and then you blow it at the last minute by trying to scrape too much right in under the wire. All right. You want to be at your best on test day. So give yourself a break between your last practice test and your test day. Study sessions. Like I mentioned, each study session should be 1 to 2 hours, right? Typically, one of those blocks is going to be an hour. You can do 2 back to back, right? Or potentially, we're building out each part of the block so that it's longer, all right? But 1 to 2 hours in a sitting, all right? If you're sitting for longer than 2 hours and you're not doing a practice test, you're probably starting to not perform very well. Right? I've taught classes that are 3 hours long, and usually that last hour, we start losing steam. All right. Those are still really good classes, but that last hour is tough. All right. I do not recommend studying for more than 2 hours because that's where I find quality starts to drop off. All right. Then I recommend maybe 1 to 2 sessions each day. All right. If again, you're not working, you don't have a job, you're not in school, maybe we can afford multiple, but space them out. And if you find you are starting to make mistakes you shouldn't, walk away. Quality is more important than quantity. Walk away if you are making mistakes and come back later. And then take 1 or 2 days off each week. I typically recommend take at least 1 weekend day for yourself. Relax, recover. All right. If it's a practice test weekend, that's a little tougher. All right. So maybe you're going to do your practice test Saturday. You're going to review on Sunday, take Monday off, but take time off. All right. If you don't, it's not going to be sustainable and you're going to start making mistakes. All right. The last day, like I mentioned, don't overdo it. Do not take a practice test on your last day. Review your error log. Visualize using your strategies, right? Imagine, okay, I'm seeing a problem and I'm really struggling with it. I am going to eliminate the answers that are obviously wrong, pick the best out of the remaining 3 and move on. That's a good strategy. A lot of people lose that one on test day. Imagine using them so it's easy to do it on test day. Commit. You're not going to make those mistakes on test day, but don't practice on your last day. I see tons of folks trying to get in a lot of work at the last minute, but that stuff does not stick. It just wears you out before your test day. All of the practice should have happened before. That last day is for strategy, for review, for going to bed early, for prepping everything for the morning after. So don't overdo it. These are my recommendations, but the general rule, if you find your quality is slipping, walk away and come back. And those are the 5 tips. So let's review 5 tips for acing the GMAT in less than 4 weeks or longer than 4 weeks. These tips are the same, except for if you have a longer timeline, you can maybe do a little more comprehensive stuff in the first month. Tip number 1, take a practice test now, ASAP, full length, official ideally, realistic, taken realistically to provide your baseline and to help you build your study plan. 2, review your mistakes on that first practice test, but on every subsequent practice problem. It's not just the what, it's the why, it's the how. This should be deeply, deeply personal, and it should take time. So give this the time it deserves. Review is the most important part of your study, and it's the part that most people get wrong. 3, target your weaknesses with a study plan. So study the things you are making mistakes on. Get specific, think strategy, and study at your level. Where are you making mistakes? Where is that 50% threshold? What is your baseline? Study there. And if your baseline score increases, study there now. Don't go so high that you're working on problems you will never see on test day. 4, structure your study sessions to optimize learning. Set your intention. You commit to not making the same mistakes you've made before. Set the stage for an effective day of study. 2, learn something. Use something like Magoosh's instructional videos to read or watch something that you can internalize. And then 3, practice with realistic problems, official ones, Magoosh ones on GMAT Club. Practice and apply what you've learned and don't make the same mistakes. And then 4, review the mistakes you did make, error log in detail, so you can take that to your next study session and your next practice test. And then finally, don't overdo it. Take a practice test every 1 to 2 weeks, right? Don't study too much in a day. Don't study for more than 2 hours in one sitting. Maybe do 1 or 2 of those in a day. Don't push it. If it's going poorly, you're making mistakes you shouldn't, walk away. And then finally, what's the last piece? I forgot. What is it? Don't overdo it on your last day. It's easy to forget about the last day, but it is critical. Make sure that you are set up for success. Just like we set up for success on each study session, set yourself up for success on test day by reviewing your error log, imagining using your strategies, but not actually practicing them. Prep for success. And that's it. All right, hopefully that was helpful. Again, these tips work if you've got 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, but even 2 months, 3 months, 4 months, it's the same. We want high quality practice catered to you. All right. I am taking questions for another approximately 13 minutes. We're going to close out on the hour. So if you have questions for me about what we talked about today, so these 5 tips, or if you have questions on anything kind of GMAT related, throw those in the chat and I am happy to answer those now. All right. And I think we might have had some previous questions that we might want to answer now. I answered some of them along the way, but we'll see if there's anything here. Okay, we got a question. Is there any platform where I can access the whole verbal course taught by you? Well, thank you. I'm hoping you have more than 2 to 3 weeks or more than a month, maybe 2 to 3 months of study. If you're looking for a comprehensive course, again, if you have less than a month, I do not recommend a comprehensive course. But what I would recommend is Magoosh. All right, at Magoosh, we have lessons that maybe weren't all written or taught by me, but were written or taught by experts on my team. We also have the live GMAT course that was written by me. I don't currently teach it, but again, everybody who does teach it was someone that I walked through the course myself, that we worked together building that course with. So I really recommend that. Magoosh is where you can find me and my content today. So yes, that is my recommendation. Okay, Vishnu says, yeah, how many mocks would you suggest is there a line one should draw? So we talked about this earlier. It depends on how long you have until your test day. So if you've got a week, you're going to take 1. If you've got 2 weeks, maybe you'll take 1 or 2. If you've got 3 weeks, you're going to take 1 or 2. If you've got 4 weeks, you're going to take 2, right? So you're taking a test every 1 to 2 weeks. If you've got a long study timeline, you're going to run out of tests, at least good ones. All right. This is something I've seen, is that folks will take really high quality tests every week and then they run out and they start retaking closer to their test day when they really need high quality tests, or they're finding random tests online and they're not adaptive, they're not realistic. Don't do that. All right. So plan ahead. What's your timeline? When will you take your test? Block it off on the calendar. What tests are you taking when? I really recommend starting with something official and ending with something official, and then filling in with as high quality as you can get in between. Hopefully that helps. Okay, Antonio says, Erika, could you also talk a bit about your prep experience when you were studying for the GMAT? Thanks. Really great question. So I was in kind of a unique experience when I was studying for the GMAT, and I try to be really, really honest about this, just because it's not going to be recreatable in a lot of situations. In that I was teaching the ACT and the SAT and writing ACT and SAT content all day. When I was studying for the GMAT. And at that time in my career, I was making a transition from working on ACT and SAT, which I still do. I love those tests, to working on GRE and GMAT. So I had this background of working on test prep already. So I knew these strategies already. I knew the value of an error log. That is something that I did like crazy. But also for my job at that point, I was literally going through GMAT problems all day, dissecting them, figuring out, okay, what sort of answer traps have we got going on? What's confusing about this language? What is consistent between these types of questions? All right, what makes this one 750 versus 700, right? I was doing that all day, every day. All right, so I didn't have, I mean, I did do kind of normal practice stuff, right? The sort of thing like taking a practice test, doing an error log. That was the primary sort of thing that I was doing, once a week, right? But in between, my study was a little bit strange. So I was breaking down the questions. But that's the sort of thing that you're kind of doing with an error log, right? Is you're going, okay, what went wrong here? Let's really get into the nitty gritty. And why did I miss it? That often has to do with kind of the specifics of how questions are worded or how they're constructed, about the diagram or the way the statements are presented or what answer traps are present, right? And it has to do with my approach, right? So the sort of thing that I was doing, you're not going to be doing, right? You're probably, if someone's working at a test prep company here, let me know in the chat because then we might share kind of a related experience. But what you can do to kind of replicate what I was doing is error log in detail, spend time. A lot of folks get frustrated with the process and they end up doing something very high level. Get deep, spend time with each question. I promise that error logging 5 questions is going to be more valuable than drilling 50. All right, so hopefully that helps. But the best thing is take your practice tests, error log them, review your error log. All right, we got a question from Vishnu. When do I start prepping for the IR and AWA? Great question. So IR and AWA, as you probably know, don't contribute to your total score out of 800, right? They are separate scores. Now, does that mean they're completely useless? No, right? Because schools do look at those things, right? They do. And if they're lower than kind of a threshold, typically they'll just put a little red flag whoop, on your application. It's not enough to get your application thrown in the trash generally, but it's one of those things that can kind of make or break. If you have a couple other little red flags, then maybe an admissions committee is going to be like, okay, that's concerning. So maybe if you have a low math score and a low IR, then we start going, ooh, we got some quant problems here, right? We have some problems with that kind of analytical mathy stuff. All right. Similarly, if your AWA is not awesome, and then they find that your essays are not awesome, all right, then we start having problems. Or maybe they find that your essays are really, really awesome and your AWA is not, and then they start going, ooh, did we plagiarize those essays? All right, so they're important, right? But they're not the most important. So I typically recommend if your scores for IR or AWA are below average, right? They're not awesome, right? Then I would typically recommend throw it in there with your normal study, right? Break up your study because often, you're spending so much time doing math, your brain kind of shuts off. It can be nice to take a little break with some AWA, right? So it's not so much when do you start prepping for them, it's deciding how much do I need to prep for them, all right? Prepping effectively. So going to the source, what is the strategy? Don't just write essays, figure out how do I write an effective essay? Don't just do the problems, figure out, okay, what types of problems? There are really defined types of IR problems. What types of IR problems am I struggling with? Okay, let me figure out what's the strategy for those. Really great stuff for that. on YouTube, on GMAT Club, all right? So figure out what you need to do and squeeze it into your study. Don't overemphasize it. I recommend a little bit. If you are looking at a week, probably don't do it. Focus on the stuff that's going to get you that total score improvement. So that's quant, that's verbal. Okay, Anuj says, while my accuracy in RC is good, my timing is too high for reading a passage. Yep, that's common. How to improve my timing? Okay, suggestions. All right, first suggestion. If you're getting high accuracy on reading comprehension, you probably know that there's a ton of stuff in that passage that is not helping you answer the question, right? There's a ton of just extra fluff in there, right? So instead of reading the whole dang passage, skim it. Prioritize. What is the main idea? What is the structure? What is the tone? All right. What's going on in here? We're going to kind of skip the details, right? And then when we go to the questions, a lot of those questions are going to be high level. You can answer those already. And anything that is a detail, you can go back and find by looking, what's the most specific word in this question? Is it stegosaurus? Okay, I'm going to find the word stegosaurus in the passage. Boom, answered. And then you can answer that question. So first tip, don't read the passage, skim the passage. I've got a bunch of videos on this on YouTube. Just look for GMAT RC or GMAT passage. You can put in Erika and you'll find videos that I have on this. But this is like my number one strategy is skim. My number two strategy, which I also have videos on, is predict. All right. I find that a lot of folks, they read the question and they go through every single answer choice, boom, 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 and read them and do process of elimination. Don't. What do you think the answer is? Then you can look at those answer choices and you can really quickly just go, nope, nope, that's not my prediction. Nope, 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 right? You can go too specific, not related, too negative, and you can eliminate those answer choices until you find the right one really, really fast. In fact, often once you predict, your eye will go straight to the right answer. All right. And that saves a lot of time. So seems like it's maybe taking more time up front because you're making that prediction, but I swear the answer choices will go faster and your accuracy will be even higher if you predict. So skim the passage, go back for details if you need them based on the question, and then predict and answer. Okay, that's the first question. Second question, my accuracy in CR and RC drops in a timed environment. Those tips that I was just talking about will really help with accuracy for RC. For CR, it's kind of similar. You're going to read the whole thing for the most part with CR, but I recommend as you go thinking structure. What is context? What is a premise? What is the conclusion? And then as you're kind of breaking those things up, you're going to start to identify as you go, wait, there was a little missing piece. Ooh, okay. All right. And you're going to start to be able to kind of get a feel for what's going on as you break down the passage. Even before that, read the question stem. Figure out what's going on. Am I trying to strengthen? Am I trying to weaken? Am I trying to bring an inference? Am I trying to find the structure? All right. Break down what type of question am I looking at here? That's going to help you as you break down the structure of the argument. One, expect what to see. If it's an inference question, you won't see a conclusion. If it's strengthen or weaken, you're going to see a conclusion, but there's going to be a problem. You know what to expect as you're breaking it down. But two, you know what you're trying to do. All right. And so then often as you read that passage, you're starting to get an idea for your prediction. And then predict. All right. If you predict an answer, spend some time figuring out what do I think it is. Even if it's a vague prediction, it's going to help you get through those answer choices faster and not waste time with answers that are obviously wrong. Okay. Structure, predict. And then never able to complete the verbal section. Doing those things will help. But the other thing that I'm going to suggest is that if a problem is giving you grief, if you look at it and you go, oh, it's not going to happen, give it a fair shake, give it 30 seconds. If you're still feeling completely in the woods, make a guess, move on. All right. Sacrifice questions you're going to miss anyway so that you don't miss questions you could get right. That's a really big strategy. Timing is everything on this test. And I find that timing makes or breaks a lot of folks. There was one student I'm thinking of who came in with a really low score to me for tutoring, but it turned out wasn't finishing either of the sections. Once we got that timing strategy locked in, next time I saw him, score had jumped by over 100 points. Timing matters. Skip questions, which means guess. Guess on the question. All right. Has Magoosh improved the course quality content since 2009? Great question. We are always improving our content. So we have queues actually of student reported issues that we see that come in. So we go through those queues and we address things. We also have this thing called item discrimination. We're getting a little specific here, but we basically see based on how frequently students are answering questions correctly and the level of those questions, we can start to see where problems maybe have some issues or questions really have some issues. And then we can refine those questions based on that feedback, both, again, directly qualitative from the student and quantitative based on how students are performing, right? So we're improving the questions, but also we do work on improving lessons and explanations as we go. The live course, for instance, is new since 2009. That's something that we put out in early 2021. Again, something that I created. So yes, there is new stuff in Magoosh. There is improved content all the time. We're actually working on some projects right now that you might find interesting about our lessons. So yes, we are improving and readdressing our content all the time. GMAT is one of our big focuses. All right. We are out of time. Thank you so much for everybody who's asked questions or who is here today. If you have more follow-up questions, feel free to throw those in the comments on this video and I'll get back to you, or someone from GMAT Club will get back to you, or someone else who's here and has advice will get back to you. Thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it. And best of luck with your test, whether it's in 1 month or more or less. All right. Thanks so much. I'll see you all later. Bye-bye.